We're down one, and our Pledge of Allegiance is going to be offered by the Vice Mayor, Richard Ortega. And please remain standing for the prayer as well, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord God, Heavenly Father, we bow before you today to give you thanks, Heavenly Father, and for this great day. It's a precious day in this wonderful community of ours within the city of Safford. We are grateful for our citizens. We are grateful for our manager. We are grateful for our city clerk, our department heads, and our employees, Lord. We ask you to please grant your touching hand over us to give us guidance tonight as we make decisions for this great community. We also ask for prayers for our mayor, Lord, that you please give him the strength that he needs, and you know what he needs, Lord. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Vice Mayor Richard Ortega, on the pledge, and thank you, Councilman Amendola, for the prayers. Appreciate it. That brings us to item 5, which is citizen comments on agenda items. And I do believe I have one for a non-agenda item. And so, Rachel, if you wouldn't mind going to the podium and speaking, I do believe that it's 3 minutes. And go ahead and state your name and your address. Your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name is Rachel Dominguez Hales. I'm from Thatcher, Arizona, 1283 8th Avenue. I have been taking my grandchildren to school at Leif Nelson before this year. I took my 2 grandchildren who are boys, and now they're 8th and 9th graders. So this year, my granddaughter, Riley, started going to school there, and last week she told me, I said, honey, how is it walking from school to Aunt Francis's house? She says, oh, it's pretty good, except that I had to walk on the road the other day because there was a dead dog on the side of the road. So then I thought to myself, I better go check and see if the dead dog's still there, okay? So I went over there, and the dead dog's gone, but we crossed the crosswalk, which is a story in its own, and then we went to walk in front of the Sundance Homes, and there was what did she say? A hump of dirt with weeds, and that was about, I'd say about 2 feet high. And when you're not 5 feet tall, that's pretty high, okay? So she walked over, no problem. Then I read the sign on the fence that said, do not block the roadway. Then next to that, there was a driveway with a Escalade parked so far out that we had to walk on the curb drainage. And then when I had to walk between that person, whoever it is, a boat, the owner of the Escalade most likely, I had a little bit of problems because I was a little bit too wide to walk between the curb, between the boat and the Ford that he has parked there next to the boat. So I thought to myself, well, you know, this is not right. For one thing, there should be a sidewalk here. For another thing, all these vehicles should be, this boat should not be in my little girl's way. Of course, I didn't tell her anything about it, didn't tell any of my family or friends what I was going to do, but here I am telling you something needs to be done about this. And this Ford and the boat are parked directly across the street from the Leif Nelson Elementary marquee sign. Anyway, I'm glad that I am not a child, and I'm glad I'm not going to Leif Nelson School because they do have a lot of problems that once you get out of their property, there's a lot of problems on the road, a lot of problems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And as I don't know if you're aware, but we're not allowed to have any communications back because it's a non-agenda item. But we do appreciate public coming in and addressing issues that are before us. and that I do believe that the manager will make sure that this process is looked into. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Knotts, it's nice seeing you again.
Thank you. That brings us to item 7, which is a presentation of the United Way of Graham and Greenlee County.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of the City of Safford United Way Employee United Way Committee. Tonight, I would like to present a check to the United Way of Graham and Greenlee Counties for the amount that was raised over the 2022 campaign. I would also like to recognize the volunteers of our committee that helped organize, fundraise, and also give countless hours to support this past year's campaign. Our current committee is made up of the following employees: Beatrice Driver, Jay Wright, Cassandra Potts, Danielle Palma, and myself. Additionally, I would like to thank the United Way Board and Denise Benton for their support. This year, our campaign raised a total of $8,910.08. These funds were raised through employee payroll deductions, the spring golf tournament, and the Oktoberfest event. Again, I would like to thank everyone who helped make this past year's campaign a success. And I do have a check here, so if you guys want to come up and I'll present you guys with the check. I don't know if council wants to be a part of the presentation as well.
Did you guys do anything? Did you guys do anything?
Nope.
I mean,
We
I
didn't do it.
I think the staff did it. They're the ones that needs to get in there.
Staff needs to be-
You're all right, Mayor.
Staff did it, they need to be up there.
You're in, Mayor. Get over there.
I just bought hot dogs. I just bought hot dogs.
We got him in there, Mayor. That's a good picture. That's a good one.
I'd just like to,
You got it.
and I'd just like to take a moment to say that, even though they thank us, I can't tell you how much we appreciate the city of Safford, their employees, and all of our citizens. Because we're just stewards of the donations. And they graciously allow us to provide funds out to our community. Last year, we provided over $2 million. That's in many educational goals, health, economics, and other projects, such as sponsorships for programs. When COVID was around, we gave a lot of money out for COVID, but we can't do that without the donation from the people in our communities. So they're really the people that need the applause.
Mayor, I have one more thing too.
Go ahead.
I'd like to congratulate the newly mayor of Clifton, Laura Doral, my classmate. Congratulations.
You got some secrets to tell?
Oh, she has a bunch of them.
Okay. Anybody else from council? Anybody? Okay, thank you. We appreciate you guys. Bringing us to item 8, which is the public hearing of a Pozo rezone. Jamie?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request to have a public hearing for a proposed rezoning of Graham County parcel number 102-19-012. The Planning and Community Development Department is in receipt of a rezone application from Randy Pozo for this parcel. The request is from the conventional manufactured home district to the multiple family residential district. The property is currently vacant as the previous single-family home has been demolished. There is one statement in your recommendation that we would like to stress. The neighborhood meeting was held on November 17th, and there has been no opposition by the public. And this will be, you'll see it on the map that it's a spot zone, which is what they're called in the planning world. But if you will look at the photo in your packet very carefully, you'll notice that directly adjacent to the property, there's existing multifamily housing. And so this will be one of the areas of the map that we focus on when we do the citywide zoning evaluation. The city of Safford lacks housing in all ranges and varieties, and the area has a mix of commercial and residential properties currently, as well as new and older developments. Your Planning and Zoning Commission minutes are attached, along with a Planning and Zoning Commission written report to approve the zone change. With that, I will stand for questions.
I do believe we have somebody that'd like to speak during the public hearing.
Yes.
Does council want to go first, or do you want to hear from the individual?
I'd like to hear from the individual.
Okay,
So would I.
all right, I do believe we have somebody here, so. We're opening it up to the public right now.
This is the applicant, Mr. Pozo.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me this evening. My name is Randy Pozo. I am the owner of the subject parcel we're discussing. I've also bringing in a partner to help develop and build a duplex. His name's Gerard de Beard, and he has a few things he'd like to speak as well. But yep, I'm standing here in front of you guys today to apply for a rezone. As she mentioned, that there is adjacent properties that are multifamily, and with the shortage that we are, as a real estate agent, full-time property manager, just trying to help fill that small gap of building some multifamily there. So I'm open to questions that you guys have.
Does anybody have any questions for him? I don't think we have any questions for you.
Okay.
We appreciate you willing to venture into this.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I get calls daily, and just of the shortage that we are suffering. So it's me just time to step up my calling to help fill just that small gap, and as I continue into this journey. So
Okay, perfect.
yep.
Okay. Anybody else have anything from the public? Anybody have anything for staff or from council? Okay, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing and reconvene into our work session. Oh,
Sure.
what?
He's acting like he wanted to.
Did you
talk.
want to speak? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, everybody, Mayor and Council, and thank you. I don't have much to say. I think most of it has already been said. The one thing that really stands out regarding this particular parcel to me is there's a lot of powers to be in this town that bring a lot of economic drive to it, namely several mines around this place. If they can't fill the jobs, it really hampers on the economic growth of not just the city, but the county and towns surrounding the area as well. The ability to house more people will help us fill more jobs. There are a lot of job applications that were not filled due to a lack of immediate housing in the immediate vicinity of the mines as well. The most beautiful thing about all this is locals taking interest to invest back into the town and try to develop it to continue that economic driving factor that this big mine brings to this town. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing and reconvene into our regular work session. Item 10-1, which is ordinance 23-001, Pozo rezone.
I move we approve ordinance 023-001.
Tammy, is this an information or discussion?
No, this is just for,
Oh,
first
discussion?
reading.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're right. I agree with it myself.
Yeah, this is open for any discussion at this time, not approval.
Councilman Lopez?
I'm good, Mayor, thank you.
All right, any other discussion? Not, we're gonna move right on. All right, brings us to item 10-1, which is new and old business minutes.
And Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and read that ordinance into
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
minutes. But you're good. Ordinance number 023-001, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, effectuating a map amendment rezoning Graham County Assessor's Parcel Number 102-19-012 from City of Safford C-MH Conventional Manufactured Home District to City of Safford R-2 Multiple Family Residential District.
Okay, thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Thanks for keeping me in line. It's your job, right? Brings us to item 11-1, which is the new and old business, the minutes. Tammy?
Mayor and Council, I'm requesting approval of the minutes for December 12th, 2022. Was there any questions or comments on those minutes?
Mayor, I make the motion that we approve the minutes from December 12th, 2022.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the December 12th meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Did you get all the hands up? All right. Brings us to item 11.2, which is the budget guidance document. John?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Based on previous conversations with City Council regarding the city's future vision and areas of interest, staff is presenting City Council with an opportunity to provide further input and clarification in the development of this year's budget guidance document that would be used to provide staff with direction in prioritizing the FY 2024 budget cycle. Staff is seeking council adoption tonight. We did delay the document in the previous meeting, so I thought for the sake of efficacy that we probably would see if the document is to your liking, maybe we can adopt without doing a work session and then bringing it back again. Obviously, at any point in the presentation, if you want to make amendments, we can do that and adopt as amended. So with that said, I will get into the presentation. Again, I've introduced the concept of a budget guidance presentation to allow council an opportunity to provide a higher level of oversight in terms of the budget and the prioritization. It will contain items that are going to be in the current year budget as long as longer-term goals that we have. So again, budget guidance, the annual budget process is one in which City Council, working with staff, determines priorities for the upcoming budget year. This process, while conducted on an annual basis, also has longer-term implications, so documents like this allow us to kind of bring this back every year, update whatever it is that is kind of repeating administrative function, but also to try and string things together over multiple years. The budget calendar, on Friday, January 20th, we had a CIP work session, and then coming up now, obviously tonight is the budget guidance document. We will be introducing tonight in a work session format some budget and financial policies, which essentially there is some new material in there, but for the most part what we've done is the same thing that we did with compensation, was to try and take all those areas that are part of our financial and our budgetary policies and put them in one place. So much of what you'll see in that document should be familiar to you. There are a couple of differences that will be pointed out to you, but for the most part, it is simply bringing together that which already exists, but it does it in one comprehensive document. In the week of February 21st through the 23rd, Council will do one-on-ones again. For some reason, they weren't done last year, but we'll want to get back to those. It gives us an opportunity to sit down and go into greater depth on some of the budget items as we get into the budget process. Budget calendar going forward. In March, we've got a couple of work sessions, again, based on previous council input. These work sessions will be on Monday nights that are non-council meeting nights. That would give us essentially a 3-hour window, so that in these work sessions, again, based on council feedback, we're going to provide an opportunity for the departments to present some material on their own, so that way you can get some direct feedback from the departments themselves. Again, this was something that came out during the last budget cycle. Following up in that, in April, we'll do the budget presentations as we've done in the past in a summary format, and then we're shooting for May 8th to adopt the tentative and for May 22nd for the final. Again, we still have the whole month of June, so if we push things out at all, we've got some room there to add extra meetings if we need them to adopt the budget. So from the perspective of City Council, we have our organizational expectations document, which discusses in various manners things regarding long-term planning. We also have council's desire to continue ongoing efforts for recreational amenities, whether it's internal programming or through IGAs. You'll see some of that in the budget itself. Implement updated employee compensation plan based on best practices. Obviously, we've been going through those conversations. We're going to have another conversation this evening on the police compensation portion of that. And then, of course, the citywide beautification and code enforcement. Again, we discussed this both in my evaluation and doing more on code enforcement, and of course, it's been a general conversation overall. Public interaction and outreach takes on various aspects. Obviously, the legislature has convened. This is a big part of an impact on cities and towns. There's already some stuff out there on food tax and the like that will be impactful to us. So we try to stay engaged on that information and bring it to you as we get it. Also, there's been a discussion about improving some of the communication, so we would be working on citywide as well as police communication documents. Maintain the city website information. Again, we've been working for a while now since the website was updated. There's a committee that tracks the content, so we're trying to keep that up to speed. And then, of course, utilize traditional social media resources. We've been using the radio when we can and using it to get out our message. Obviously, maintain a positive media and public relations relationship. And then again, continue to engage with Parks and Rec Committee on input regarding citywide recreational amenities. Again, they're still convened, they're still active, and they will play a part in our park design, and they have obviously been tasked by you to do some other things as well, including beautification. Fiscal and budget management, again, adopt financial budget policy guidelines to enhance standardized annual budget development, implementation, and oversight. Again, the idea being if you standardize it, whenever we make alterations to it, everything's in one place. You get to review it. When you make changes, it's easy to track. It's all one document. Obviously, we have our fund balance requirements, using models to project forward on our utilities, although that has been somewhat of a challenge as it regards the electric, given the volatility in gas, but we do our best. Provide department monthly operating reports and also monitor revenues on a monthly basis. Community development, staff has been working to get training in economic development to help us with economic development opportunities in the city. Also, we want to continue to enhance public interactions to create a more business-friendly environment. And I know our community development director has been working hard to address that. We often hear that it's difficult to build in Safford, and so we try to figure out and dig down deeper as to why that might be. I actually had a conversation on that this weekend. So we are working to try and create a more user-friendly environment. Also seek opportunities for special events programming. And then, of course, one of the tasks that were part of my evaluation was to try to hire a new code enforcement officer so we can give more direct attention to that program. Human resources management, institute, maintain competitive salary and benefit structure based on best practices. Obviously, we've been having a lot of conversations about that. Again, tonight we'll talk more about a written compensation plan for the police department, which we've been able to work with the police chief and captain to recodify and provide written materials for your review. Implement a salary survey as directed by council during the budget process, which is an internal activity. No consultants were hired. Seek to encourage employee development through training and education. And then utilize succession planning. This is something that we've been focusing more and more on to try to create internal promotional opportunities. We will continue to do that. Continue to use and develop employee appreciation activities, programs, and events, which that also has been evolving. Airport, a lot of work has gone into the airport. Exploring economic development opportunities, and a big part of that is trying to see if we can implement an air service program, but the overall effort has been to improve both the operation and the infrastructure at the airport, which then makes it more appealing as an economic development opportunity. Explore opportunities to expand city land holdings around the airport. We've been doing some work in that regard as well. Continue to develop and expand airport infrastructure as needed. Obviously, we're bringing water out there. We've done some improvements to some of the existing infrastructure as well. We just recently adopted minimum operating standards, rules and regs, and a lease policy, so all those documents have been upgraded. Implement and maintain current fee structure. Also, went out and did a market analysis so that we are more in keeping with competitive rates for our airport. And then there is going to be a discussion about making the airport its own fund in order to better assess revenue and expenditure patterns. So, it still will be funded through general fund revenues, but we'll track it as a separate fund, and that will allow us to then look at cost recovery more, so we'll be able to track the revenues as they come in and see what the impact is for some of our fee changes and the like, so we can assess cost recovery at the airport. Economic development, again, mostly through community development, we continue to look at development of economic development opportunities in the city. We also are seeking to collaborate with other organizations in the area to try to work together to try to also enhance economic development. There was a discussion in the last budget process where it was suggested that perhaps we relook at our economic development funding and how we're using it. So we will reassess our micro loan program, which has been highly successful, and also the business support program, which has some challenges now in light of the Shires case, which makes the program as it was currently configured more difficult. So we will be coming back with alternate suggestions for use of our economic development funds. And then update the website. We are in the process right now, the vendor that does our economic development portion of the website, which is the video portion, they're in the process of updating those videos, and there's no charge to us. I think they get sponsors and get advertisements, so we're in the process right now of updating those videos. Utilities continue implementation of public outreach program. That has begun, and we've had some classes, or we've had at least a class with the schools where we did have a teaching session, I guess, to talk about conservation, exploring opportunities to utilize reuse water, exploring utilization of Fry Mesa, which will be part of the upcoming budget. Explore opportunities to expand the customer base also is included this year in our CIP, and we're doing some of that through grant funding. Implement updated electric rebate program. Obviously, we just had a recent conversation on that. It's going to require, I think, a little bit more fine tuning, but I think we're not going to continue with what we have. We just got to really kind of figure out where we want to go from here. So I think staff will be bringing back some options as it regards that program. And then to continue to diversify energy resources such as solar. Obviously, we're part of the building of a solar plant that would help provide additional electricity to the city that would get us far less dependent on fossil fuels, which right now are really killing us because they're just all over the place. So this is going to be a welcome addition to our utilities program.
John, I have a quick question.
Sure.
This is something I have in reference to the elderly. Were we able to update the website to put the Give to the Heart program in there for them?
You know, I don't know if we updated the website that way. I can look into that and
If
get
you will,
back to
please.
you. And if we haven't, we can. But,
Okay, I would really appreciate that.
I'll look into it,
Okay.
sure. Capital improvement program, obviously, we just went over that on Friday. So we utilized the capital improvement team to comprehensively review the capital improvement program. We really did give it an overhaul this year in terms of the way we approach it, the methods that we used, what's in the CIP, the way we assess them, and also the processes we use to get from a design to an actual built project. So a lot of time and effort has gone into kind of revamping the CIP to make it not just a listing of projects, but something that has a reasonable opportunity to be funded and built. And then, of course, well, I basically covered all that in that slide. So again, the CIP and you know, council was able to see some of that in play on Friday in the way that we actually regrouped, the way we presented the information, and we also discussed some of these administrative changes that I just mentioned. So with that, that's all I have, and I'm open to suggestions. Again, we could bring it back. My hope was, depending on your feedback, we can make amendments and change it and go from here, but my hope was that we didn't need to bring it back a second time. So that's all I have.
John, is this a possible action item, or?
It is. It can be, yeah. I'd like it to be an action item for adoption and inclusion in the budget process.
Okay.
Go ahead, Arnold.
We still have 101s on the horizon still with this. So if we were to adopt it tonight, take action on it, there wouldn't be any way to amend it later on if we wanted to amend it after the one-on-ones.
Well, my suggestion to you, Mayor, Councilman Lopez, would be that if you want to wait till after the one-on-ones, you could, but the whole idea behind this is it provides us with direction moving forward. Now, understand that the direction that you're providing is fairly high level. So the information that we would discuss in the one-on-ones would be very specific. But it would, this, adoption of this would not hinder you from making changes going forward. It's simply a high-level document to provide us with basic guidance.
Okay, so that's not a barrier we're gonna have.
Correct.
Because, of course, in our budget, I would always want, not this by myself, but that we always have water up on top of that. Water exploration, that we meet our water needs, we have our skid going in, and we didn't talk about it in a whole lot the other meeting and stuff, but water is one of my big priorities, of course.
Mayor Councilman Lopez, the skid, I think, is in the process of being purchased. And water exploration, as part of our review of the CIP, was determined that rather than making a capital project, it is now an operational project, so, or item. So it's still in there, it's just located in a different place.
Okay, and then talked about the laws and the other meeting, I talked about, is it possible to combine, because we have laws that are gonna be dropped this year that are gonna affect us. We have 50% of our legislator are freshmen, brand new people, so it's gonna be kinda bumpy for a little while. And then with the resolutions, I talked about going towards a League of Cities and Towns, I didn't know if those two were gonna be kept in mind together, because there's gonna be a lot coming forward. Not so much in resolutions with the League of Cities and Towns, but the laws that are gonna come in front of us.
Mayor, Councilman Lopez, you know, every year we go through this process, and every year there's a grouping of bills that come forward. One of the most notable right now is the idea that they want to do away with the ability to tax food for home consumption, which would be a significant hit to our revenue stream. Fortunately, I guess for us, it's a significant hit to everybody's revenue stream, so the cities and towns as a group will end up moving on that item. But we have several calls with the league, clerk, finance, intergov, and police, and we track all the bills as they emerge. We track them as they go through the process and try to kind of get a gauge as to, you know, their likelihood of passage. And then depending on the bill, we then engage with the delegation in order to try and kind of provide our 2 cents worth, of course, working with the league. So every year we're always engaged on those, and we try to make as much headway as we can.
And I know we now currently have monthly reports, department monthly reports. It's on our website. We can go there and look at them anytime we want. I know staff puts them up there. But one of them that we haven't seen much of this year, or 2 years it seems like, is like sales tax. Where are we at quarterly? We haven't seen those in quite some time. What our actuals are compared to what we were estimating. We used to have some kind of report that where we could follow some of those things that were going on, because that's kind of a concern where we're sitting.
Mayor Councilman Lopez, I was under the assumption that those were still being provided. Year to date, we're up again on revenue, so revenues are coming in above the levels that were budgeted again. And again, a lot of that is driven by the inflationary factor, but we can make sure we get those out there for you, and we will be having those discussions as we go through the budget as well.
And then you touched on some of our employees moving from within. So that way I want to make sure they are getting the training available to them. We hit the slump where we were all doing it on Zoom and that kind of stuff. It does make a difference sometimes, lots of times attending the training. Sometimes just to get out once in a while, but the training is always offered to them and takes place.
Mayor Councilman Lopez, we haven't reduced any of the training. Most of it is based in the departments. And so usually it's skill-based, and so they continue to do it. I myself will be going to a conference starting tomorrow, and I know usually the departments themselves plan for various trainings that they've done. I went through some management training earlier in the year as well. So I think the departments are still budgeting for that, and I think for the most part they probably have increased some of that training in recent years as we've kind of come out of the COVID scare that we had. So I think that that is still being pursued, although we haven't reviewed what's in the budgets yet, so we'll see what's in there.
Okay. That's all I have, Mayor.
I just wanted to clarify that we'll have the one-on-ones to get into this specifics of a lot of this, but as a guidance document, this seems to hit everything that we've discussed, being part of the budget.
Correct. Mayor, Councilman Hemphill, a big part of this is me reflecting back to you those areas of interest that you have. And so making sure that, you know, we're covering a lot of the ground that we've already talked about. That then helps provide guidance for the department heads and for me as we go in and we assess the budgets to make sure that we're addressing some of these areas. So again, yes, most of what you see here is reflective of conversations that we've already had, which again is the point. In my past experience early on when I got here, we'd come in and say, hey, do we have anything for the budget? And, you know, we kind of sit around and look at each other. So here, at least now we're bringing together concepts that we've discussed previously into one place and making sure that this is indeed some of the vision that you have going forward.
Right.
I think this might fit in this, you know, in here too. Talking about annexation, I know there'd be a certain amount of cost to it and all this, but it seems like, you know, it's brought up and then we never hear anything else about it.
Mayor Counts, Vice Mayor Ortega, annexation is, I mean, we can try and actively pursue it, but it's somewhat random. Usually annexation is often driven by development. But I guess, you know, again, maybe the community development director could provide some additional input. But it generally, you don't necessarily decide on an area to annex unless there's some kind of development imperative that's driving it forward. And it is something that was in the general plan, I think, that we have.
Well, we service a lot of areas that are outside the city. I mean, to me, it's just something we should look at.
Okay. Would you like me to add a bullet point?
Fine.
He's always said that, so.
I will
he's always
add it.
brought that up.
For years.
I'm real impressed with the layout of your budget process, but I don't know if adopting it tonight when 3 of the 7 of us weren't at the work session, do you guys feel like you had enough time to make a decision? Because I don't want to do it quickly if. I do, as a guidance document, is like you said, is an organized layout of the areas that we've mentioned that we'd like the budget to focus on. It makes sense to me. I'm very impressed with it, and it's been that much needed for quite some time, so I'm in favor of it. I just don't want to.
Mayor Councilman McGoy, there's nothing in here that is specific to the projects. We will bring back the CIP. We will have another opportunity to take a look at it. In fact, given the layout of the timeframes, we may even bring it back as another week where we revisit it again. So we push the adoption out from May into June. But all this is saying is that we're looking at the process, we're looking at the funding. We're not saying anything about specific projects. I know I want to have more discussion on the firehouse. I think there's some need there to kind of flush that out more. So this does nothing in terms of tying your hands in terms of any specifics within the budget. These are all conceptual. And then again, as we go forward, it's not going to say, well, we had this bullet point in the budget guidance, because it's guidance that would keep you from moving forward in a different direction on any of these items.
The motion, I'll second it.
Move that we adopt the
Budget guidance.
find it.
And I think
Budget guidance document.
I'll second it.
should we, before we probably want to do it as amended, because I know that the vice mayor had an addition.
As amended?
I'll second it.
As amended.
As amended. I'll
As
second it.
amended to include a bullet point regarding annexation.
Yes.
That's
Mayor,
what I
do we
meant.
have to clarify that ourselves as a council, or can the staff correct us on our wording?
I believe that the right way to do it is Councilman McGoy would make his motion that we approve the budget guidance documentation with the amended bullet points to include annexation. And then
That's
that would then
correct.
get the second.
That's correct.
And so I do believe that's what you said.
That's what I meant.
Okay. And that is
And I
your
second
second.
it. That's what I wanted to do.
And thanks, Councilman, for clarifying that. And so we have a motion to approve the budget guidance documentation with the amended version to include a bullet point for annexation. And I have a second. And any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Bring us to item 12.1, contracts and agreements bids.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request from Mayor and Council to approve the BLM Memorandum of Understanding and 10-year operating plan. The City of Safford owns and operates roughly 13 miles of transmission main within the Gila Box and Lower Bonita Creek area. This area of land is publicly owned and managed by the Bureau of Land Management. The BLM is federally regulated and operate within guidelines to ensure the preservation of land, wildlife, and habitat within its jurisdiction. The MOU and 10-year operating plan allows the City of Safford and the BLM to work together to ensure the needs of both entities are fulfilled. The attached agreement is a continuation of the original 2006 agreement between both parties. Minor changes are made with language, definitions, and additional species. The proposed changes within the agreement leaves the City of Safford's ability to maintain, operate, and the city's water rights intact. It is recommended that Mayor and Council approve the BLM MOU and 10-year operating plan. So attached to the document, there's a lot of supporting documentation. And to kind of give you an idea of real-world application with this document, if you were to turn to page 84 of your packet, that is a map showing the access roads. So this past week, Bonita Creek received a lot of water, and it flooded out our access road in the bottom to where we couldn't access our infrastructure. Well, this document actually guides us of how to repair that road. So the Bonita Creek Road is a level 1 road, which is part of the definition change, and it allows us to put that road back with native material. And page 85 shows us if there's any areas where we need to borrow native soil, then we can take a loader out there, dump truck, load that native soil up, and transport it into that location. So I would like to mention that not only Bill Sims did review this MOU 10-year plan, but also our water attorney, Steve Ween, who protects our water rights. He also reviewed this document and sees no concern. And with that, I would like to open any questions.
I'll move we approve the Bureau of Land Management MOU.
Second?
We have a motion to approve the Lebanon BLM contract MOU. We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Brings us to, thank you, Morgan. Brings us to item 13.1, P card report.
No, number 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, 12.2, Lebanon contract.
Thank you, Mayor.
Calm
Council,
down.
this is a request for the mayor and council to authorize the execution of a professional service agreement between the City of Safford and Westland Resources for the engineering services for the Lebanon Loop Water Project. It's recommended by staff to execute this agreement. This is a little bit of background on this one. Due to some of the water quality and quantity issues, a private citizen requested to increase water services to an additional 65 homes. This is near that Thorn Lane and Lebanon Road. This project was initiated in 2018, and several stage gates have been completed with the assistance of Westland up to this point. This is including the approval of a grant at $5.7 million from the USDA Rural Development. This project will include the development of approximately 14,700 feet of new infrastructure. It is proposed to use Westland Engineering to continue to support the project based on the required permitting. Per the City Council directive, this professional agreement is fully funded by the grant itself and will have no cost to the city. The proposal received from Westland is in the amount of $336,932. With that, in your packet, there should be a detailed breakdown of that cost. And with that, I'd open it up to questions.
I'll move we approve the Lebanon Loop contract bid award.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the Lebanon Loop contract bid, and we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. That brings us to item 13, P-card report. We're good to go on?
It looks good.
You good?
It looks good so far. There's some descriptions are getting a little short, so it's a little hard to exactly figure out what it was spent on, but for the most part, it's all good. It's easy read, getting easier to read, and some of it, of course, shakes me, but I think we're doing good. When I can read it and figure it out myself, you guys are doing good. I thank you for it.
Okay, how about over 5,000? We good? Over 5,000 in revenue? Good? If I'm going too fast, let me know. Okay, that brings us to item 14, announcement of current events.
Mayor, I have something for the manager.
Okay.
Mr. Casella, I received a complaint from a citizen in Thatcher in reference to contacting a water issue, and they said they tried calling the number several times and all that, and nobody answered, and they had to call 911. I'll find out I'll find out the rest of that.
Do you have contact information?
Yeah, I'll get that for you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And we can check into that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Just because I'm open and I live in a glass house, I'd like to just let everybody know that staff and of course the public will end up hearing this. I was diagnosed on Wednesday with stage 4. I'll be moving into doing a lot of stuff from here on out, and I go in on this Wednesday for some procedures, for operation procedures. So just to let you all know, but I still will take my job serious, and I still love my city. I'll still fight like hell for it. So just let everybody know that. That's kind of where I've been last week. So with that, don't feel sorry for me.
Yeah, but we'll pray for you, Mayor.
Absolutely, thank you. So anybody else have anything under announcement, current events? Okay, going on to 15, requests for future agenda items. Okay, if that, we're going into 16, report on operational items.
We don't have any, Mayor.
We don't have any? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close our regular meeting and reconvene into a council work session. That gets us to item 18.1, which is the financial budget guidelines. Rob?
Mayor, if I might just provide just a brief introduction. There's a lot of text here, and so I've asked Rob to try to condense it as much as he can. Most of what's in here is stuff we're already doing. He's gonna try and point out those areas that are new to make sure that, you guys understand anything that's changed.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to share a document that John has really set up appropriately. The financial policies that is in front of you in a draft form is really a collection of existing directives of council, perhaps existing ordinances or resolutions that have been passed from time to time, or based on guidance that you provided staff from one budget year to the next. The reason for putting them all in one spot is so that way they can be found. All right, so that we can communicate to all of you, perhaps new council members, new members of this community, so they can understand how we go about building our budget and how we go about managing our budget. So within your packet, on page 186 of your packet, is the beginning of the financial policies. So the intent is to have them in one spot, and much like it's being done, like John mentioned with compensation, is to document our existing practices. So this is, in essence, a regurgitation, if you will, of things that exist, but there are some small changes, some nuances that I wanted to walk through. My intent is not to read to you 8 pages of text, merely to point out those highlights of some suggested changes. So this is a work session looking for some feedback and guidance. that we ultimately would bring this back perhaps as early as February 13th in order for it to be ratified. So if you can look into the budgets, the financial guidelines, it's actually segregated into two components. One's called the budget section, the other fiscal section. Those are for two specific reasons. The budget section is how do we create the budget, and then the fiscal is how do we operate it. So budget is on creation, the inputs and assumptions on how we go about building the budget, and then fiscal is really the controls or management thereof and how we can assure that we're stewards of public funds. So the first thing I want to show you is on page 2 within the document, and really talking about a concept where it's talking under their framework, operating capital improvement and then supplemental. So you're familiar with the two terms, operating and capital improvement, two different buckets, if you will. One, how to operate our organization. The other, how to build and create new things and or retrofit. The concept of supplemental is bringing to this body those net new items that don't exist in the budget today. So we want to bring you an operating budget that you can compare year over year, so you can see if there are any inflationary pressures, if you can see where there perhaps are some changes that you want to consider relative to compensation and the like. You can see that year over year. A supplemental is adding something to the budget that we don't have today. So in the budget guidance that John had just indicated, one of those elements is looking at additional code enforcement. So we would package that together as a supplemental and bring that package to you along with others to say we would like to add that to the budget. It would be fully funded. It would identify the staffing requirements, the first year cost, as well as ongoing operational cost after the first year. So you will be seeing that concept moving forward if that is appropriate for this council. The next change that we're talking about is on page 3, and that was also addressed under the guidance conversation. And that's where we're looking at, if you look near the bottom of there under proprietary funds, the airport fund kind of stands out. We do already track airport costs separately, but to better align with federal guidance and FAA guidance, we really need to segregate those revenues and the expenses that are happening at the airport property so we can ensure that moving forward, we can clearly communicate to the FAA that all revenues generated on said property are spent there. So really no major change there, otherwise just identifying that it is going to be an additional fund brought forward. On page 4, to highlight for you, it's just to reiterate the budget stabilization reserve that was indicated earlier in the budget guidance conversation of the 50% of the prior year operating budget, as well as our current year debt service. There are some nuances in there in regards to the revenue stabilization fund that was also addressed by council in prior. We just wanted to put that all in one spot so that way it is clear.
Which fund was that?
I'm sorry?
What fund was that again?
So this is what we're calling the fund balance or budget stabilization reserve of your fund balance, which is at 50% of the prior operating budgets plus the debt service within that fund. Okay.
So, Mayor Councilman Lopez, if you recall, one of the ads that we did last year, since we have that pool of money sitting there, if we hit an economic downturn, one of the things that we had put forward to council was to be able to use some of those monies to offset the reduction in revenue if you were in a recession, and then over a period of time we would pay ourselves back. It was a way for us to stabilize our operating budget by using funds that really at this point are sitting there if things really go wrong. In the meantime, it at least makes them available to us. We would come to you, say this is the amount we're using from that reserve. We would then, with your guidance, if you want to go forward, we use them and then we pay ourselves back over a period of time. So we call it a revenue stabilization fund. It's not really a fund, it's just monies within our overall fund balance that we put aside under the 50% prior year actual plus debt service policy that we have. It's using those monies.
Under the 50% that we're calling fund balance?
If you recall, all major operating funds right now have a reserve that's based on 50% of prior year actuals plus current year debt service. So as we built those reserves up and we achieved them, now they're there for us if, as a rainy day fund, if things really go badly, you can always dip into those reserves and use them for expenditure purposes. The idea being that very often they'll sit there, usually if things go wrong, usually you'll reduce your budget or make adjustments unless it's really bad, and then you could use those monies. So rather than just let them sit there and basically earn a really low interest rate, you can now access those funds over the short term, so that the idea of an economic downturn requiring some kind of layoffs or something would be mitigated. You'd ride out that short-term dip with those funds to supplement your revenues, and then you would pay yourself back at a later time as you come back out of that recession.
I think I got most of that. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Yeah. Mayor, members of the council, the only other change here is just to clarify under the budget stabilization reserve, there is none under the grant funds because the grantor is telling us and providing us the money to spend for set purpose. So we just wanted to be clear that while we say that that reserve is there across all funds, it is not on the grant side because of the grant requirements. The next section that we're looking at is in regards to, on page 5, is the way in which the council has in the past directed us to spend certain fund balances or earmark certain revenues for said purposes. So here it is not necessarily anything new. Again, with creating a new airport fund, it doesn't change the funding that this prior council and future councils may want to move some general fund into the airport fund to ensure that it operates. But here it's just clarifying that that will be a transfer to ensure that the airport does remain functioning, and it's merely just a mechanics, budgetary mechanics, if you will, based on council's directive. Also on page 5, it's the discussion on contingencies. And what differs between a contingency and your budget reserve or budget stabilization reserve, contingencies are contemplated in the current fiscal year when you adopt the budget. So we would specifically ask for contingencies by fund that you would appropriate, just like you did this year. So in fiscal 23, there's $8 million split between the general fund and enterprise funds for purposes of not knowing what might be coming our way, whether it be an unanticipated expense, or it could be very well a grant is coming our way that we didn't even know existed, 12 months or 18 months ago, that now we can actually seek those funds and actually spend them. The takeaway here is that any use of contingencies would require this body's action for us to move the money or the appropriation from contingency for said purpose. So it's an appropriate budgetary mechanism in order to abide by state statutes. If you don't budget for an expense, the state tells you you can't spend it. So that's why we identify what is known within our budget. We budget for those known items, and then we lump everything that is unknown into contingency, and we'll bring that back to council as necessary.
So we're not using contingency money because we did something bad. It's not that we underestimated something or anything like that. We set it up there again so that we could spend it when we need to, not just keep it in reserve.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Lopez, that's correct. So one of the items that you just dealt with a couple of months ago was the purchase price agreement adjustment for the electric. Our costs are going up. We have a contingency that has helped covering part of that cost going up. So that if without having that contingency, state law says, I don't care if your expenses went 40, 50, 120% higher, you need to ensure that you have that appropriation in order to spend it. So what jurisdictions will do is budget a fairly significant amount in contingency for those purposes, plus for purposes of grants. Granting cycles at the federal level are not equated to the Arizona state statutes on when we actually have to adopt a budget. So some of those dollars from the federal perspective are not until a year away when we will be in the midst of our budget. So we then can apply for them, accept them, and use them by moving contingency that you will contemplate when you look at fiscal 24's budget. So we will bring those numbers forward.
And it helps us buffer our tentative budget, our tentative estimate.
Correct. Yes, Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Lopez, absolutely. So once you adopt that tentative budget, that's the last change you can make to that budget for that year. So when we come to you later on this calendar year for fiscal 24 adoption, once you adopt the tentative, the only thing you can do is move money around if something were to happen before the final. You could very well, this body could take money from contingency and do a specific action to dedicate those dollars for a specific line item, or leave it in contingency for some further action. Okay. Thank you.
Just a reminder, we're in a work session. I know we tend to stay kind of in council mode, but we are in a work session, so, you know, if you have feedback or discussion, it's more open, just as a reminder.
So Mayor, members of council, the final change based on past practices is on page 6 in the draft policies, and this is related to budget amendments. And this is in the fiscal side, meaning how are we going to operate the budget after it's been adopted? So starting July 1 of any given fiscal year, how would we transact the budget and how would we monitor and control it? So we took the framework for this budget amendment matrix straight out of, well, almost straight out of what we have for our purchasing policy that council has adopted. If you recall that there's certain levels of approval on who can approve certain purchases within that purchasing policy. What we're seeking to have here is providing administrative capability within city staff to move budget appropriation from a line item to another line item. We would not be growing the budget in any way. We would not be moving money in or out of personal services expenses, meaning adding people or taking money from salary and buying office supplies with it. Anything dealing with salaries and anything dealing with contingency based on this matrix would require council's authorization. What this is basically asking for is if a said department had money in, let's say, a line item for tools and actually needed additional budget appropriation in a line item for materials to operate, as long as it's under said value in this matrix, they would be able to make that happen. So it's an administrative move based on, and that still meets the test under state statutes relative to the appropriation that you would adopt. So we're not growing the budget, we're merely moving the plan, if you will. The budget is always a plan, and sometimes your best laid plan needs to be altered as you move forward. So it's taking that legal appropriation that you provide in a line item, and where it fits into the numbers that we had here, it could be moved around. But again, we would not be moving anything from contingency. Staff would not without authorization of council, nor would we be moving anything into or out of our staffing costs, right? Because that is a very sensitive line item that we did not want to take on and just deal with administratively.
Is that what I asked you about the other day? If the staff needed to move on something before it went even higher, they could possibly go forward without having to spend 2 months to come before us again?
Yes, Mayor and members of the council, I believe, Councilmember Lopez, you're talking about what we talked about at the CIP.
Yeah.
And so where there was discussion on costs going up and, geez, we're not within that realm anymore, this would allow for that. This is talking both about the operating as well as the capital improvement. And as long as there are funds that are appropriated within that program, if you will, for that capital plan, we can move forward and make that happen.
It's not a blank check, but it helps untie their hands somewhat.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, and the idea is that we based it on the purchasing policy, right? So we're at levels that we're comfortable with. So again, this is new, and we're not seeking adoption tonight. This is the first time you get to take a look at it, so you get time to go over it. We can go over it throughout the budget process if you have questions. But again, it is an efficiency issue, right? So as long as you're comfortable with the amounts, so it never gets more than 60,000, which would be the city manager only. So anything there or below, you'd be able to move budget appropriation around within a fund and not involving personnel. So again, it creates an efficiency. And so again, this is the first time you've seen it, so it's just a work session, and then we can talk about it further. But that's the idea. It's basically what you had brought up before, which makes us be able to do things more efficiently, but not at levels where you're like, okay, we're uncomfortable with the amount of money that's being moved. So there are limits to what can be moved.
Not turning you loose.
Exactly. That's the idea.
So Mayor and members of the council, the rest of the document on the fiscal side is just communicating what we do historically relative to monitoring our budget, where we would do monthly reporting, we do line item reviews, we engage with an independent auditor to do our look to close out our fiscal year books, and we do periodic reviews relative to our user fees. So none of that is new. It's just codifying, if you will, in this document that says, as we prepare and manage fiscal 24's budget, here's how staff is going about doing so. in building it and then in operating it. So you have the changes in front of you. Really, there are only 4 dot points that I have, which are really implementing the concept of supplemental request, the creation of the separate account for the airport fund, clarifying elements of the budget stabilization reserve by fund, what was the value that will be in there and perhaps what fund is not, AKA the grant funds would not be subject to that, as well as creation of a budget amendment matrix as proposed. So I'm here, John's here to answer any questions that you might have. Again, we'd love your feedback. I've used this in other jurisdictions. It is a best practice that becomes part of the budget document, so that when somebody picks that document up in that fiscal year and says, what made this budget, what were the inputs to it and why? In some cases, there are prior legislative acts like the half-cent sales tax going to transportation. In other cases, it's formal action or resolution of this council identifying that certain dollars should be earmarked for said purpose. So we'd love to have some feedback if you have any additional. Thank you.
So this one portion that we've been talking about right now, that's going to be a policy change?
Yeah.
Yes, it would be new.
As a sufferer of moderate to severe OCD, cleaning all this up and organizing it and putting everything in its right place with the airport and compensation, the budget, all of it is a highlight for me of our recent activity. So I appreciate the work that goes into cleaning all this up.
Actually, we're getting things organized, and that's something that, you know, they weren't organized too well and simplified so that we could understand them. It's a good job. It's all helping.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Bill Sims.
Go ahead.
As you know, I work with 70-plus other cities. This is a phenomenal document. For the one reason the councilor just said, putting it all in one spot is perfect. Secondly, I think the table that identifies authorities is something that we always have to puzzle through when a question comes as to do you have authorities. That's excellent. Thirdly, do focus on the issue of risk. We talk about, where was it? Risk management. Rob, before you came to Safford, were you in a larger city?
He's getting back to the mic.
Sorry. Yes, Mr. Sims, yes, I was. I worked at the City of Phoenix for just about 29 years, and now I've been doing interim support for other jurisdictions, both here in Arizona and other communities in Colorado for the last 5.
No, the point about risk management, Safford is in the risk pool, so there will be very nominal risk management because all you have to cover is what I'll call your deductible, the self-insured retention, with the exception of things that aren't covered. So that's why this is a good thing to have. But for council's point of view, there will be modest risk management because you've in effect set that off to the risk pool. And then finally, on the investments, I like that because all this is public money, and you're referring to the local government investment pool. You're not going to get rich in the local government investment pool, but you're not going to lose your shorts. And so that's probably a wise one. But bottom line, this is a good tool. I'm going to set it aside and use it for my other jurisdictions. Thank you, Rob.
So in other words, Bill, you won't be billing us for tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, that brings us to item 18.2, the landfill policies.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Per the request at the last council meeting on January 9th, this item is for information, discussion, and possible direction with respect to landfill policies in Safford residential once a month free dump at the Safford landfill. I'm going to focus mostly on the residential free dump because I believe that's what the question was involved about, so a little background on that. As part of the 2018 budget, the city had introduced as one of its enhanced services offered one free dump of residential trash per month for City of Safford residents at no extra cost. This service has continued to grow in popularity over the past 4 years In order to use this service, a resident must provide a utility bill showing City of Safford trash service and a driver's license. Typically, the resident on the driver's license must be present, and the address on the driver's license should match the address on the utility bill. Staff's been fairly flexible in this to an extent with this requirement, but this simple task always seems to be a source of contention at the scale house. Included in this item, I've included some landfill usage information for 2022, including the total tonnages, as well as the resident data on how many residents are taking advantage of this once-a-month free dump service. Also included is a landfill and sanitation trifold pamphlet that is available to residents. For general information at the Safford and a Safford residential free dump flyer that's available to residents, as well as posted on the drive-through window at the landfill. The information on this flyer was also added to the city website under landfill. And so I'm going to leave it at I do think this is a good service. I think it's something that's very beneficial to Safford residents. I recommend that we continue this, but we're encouraging your input, your direction, maybe some guidance, some advice, and help us enforce kind of the rules to keep this thing in place and keep it functioning properly. So with that, I'll open it up to questions and discussion, and let you, I can give you some examples of some issues we've had if you want. It's up to you.
I might be a little behind on this, but is the complaint, are they getting there and not having a utility bill with them and don't realize that that's what they're supposed to have?
Well, they say they don't realize it, but they're obviously taking advantage of it, so they're hearing it somewhere. We tell people all the time, the sanitation drivers are constantly telling people that their cans are overflowing. Hey, you got a once-a-month free dump, use it. We hand out flyers. So the information's getting to them, and they either get to the window and forget and don't say anything until they get to the outbound window and don't have the proper stuff, and then they're mad, or they show up and their utility bill is for somebody else and they're trying to deliver for somebody else. We have to draw the line somewhere. We also have landlords that have multiple properties, and the residents are paying the utility bills, but they're trying to get free dumps for all their properties, and vice versa. If they're paying the utility bills, then the residents aren't paying the utility bill, but they're trying to get the free dump. So it's just it's an ongoing, and it just goes on and on. We also have issues with people sending multiple family members, and we have to track it by address. And once an address has a free dump, we check it off in a system. That way, someone's not sending their kids or their wife or multiple people for the same address, because they try. I mean, they do.
So it's not it's not just the driver's license, for example, or?
No, it's
just a whole.
And we're very lenient. So if they have a driver's license and the name matches the bill, but the addresses don't match, yeah, we accept it. Or vice versa. If the addresses match, but the names aren't the same. If somebody sends their son, and their name's got to be in the utility bill, we
Right.
work with them. There are cases where, if somebody's, got a grandmother or somebody's passed away and they're cleaning up an estate, and they need to use that free dump. If they'll call ahead down to City Hall and just say, hey, this is what I got going on, call customer service will tell the scale house, hey, these guys are going to be delivering. We'll work with them, but we need to know before they get there, because we hear every excuse in the book at the scale house. And the numbers have grown. We're up, we're averaging over 150 residents a month, and I think when we started out, we were lucky to get 30 or 40. And so it's being taken advantage of, and I think it's great. We also have, before I forget to mention, we have 3 Community Pride Day cleanups every year. Our first one for the year is coming up in exactly a month. The 23rd through the 25th of February will be that free dump weekend for countywide. So make sure you get that word out too.
Well, you guys we're making big effort to collect this. Like you said, 3 times a day, 1 free dump thing, curbside,
Bulk
quite a
pickup.
bit. So when I read this, enhancing the signs that they need to stick to and not be picking on the people at the gate, I agree with you there, Mr. Henry.
Thank you. No, we just appreciate your support. If you get a complaint and it's legitimate, please tell us about it, and we'll take care of it. But A lot of times the complaints aren't what they're all cracked up to be, and people just are trying to take advantage of the system.
And that is so true, because people that try to take advantage of something, they're the ones that are really gonna complain. The people that accidentally, you know, screw up, they're nice about it. You know, it's the ones that are trying to beat the system that are the tough ones.
And I think you said it's been going on 4 years now. We should, people know.
Yeah, we adopted this with the 2018 budget, so.
So we stick to our guns. We got some rules out there.
And we've got, and if you look at the maps I provided, you know, we're roughly 1% of our tonnage for the month is this free dump. So we're, you know, 1% of our volume going in a month is causing 90% of our problems up there. But it is a good service. I really do think it's needed, and as long as they abide by the rules, I think it's great, and it'll continue to grow. It will.
Do you think that it's helped kind of solve some of the wildcat dumping all over the county?
Well, that's the hope that it does. You know, you guys tell me if you feel like it's helped. I hope it does. I hope it's helping. I mean, I hope that along with some of our bulk pickup and the 3 times a year as the community pride days as opposed to 2 weeks a year. I hope that helps. I mean, that's the intent of all of it.
Anybody else? Thanks, Lance.
Thank you.
18-3, sworn police officer STEP program. Danielle? Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Engagement photos.
Personal photos, right?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request for Mayor and Council to provide discussion and direction on the Police Department STEP program. Items that need to be addressed are as follows. Option 1, the police compensation follows the compensation plan used for all other city employees. Option 2, utilize the updated version of the 2005 Sworn Police Officer STEP program. The background, it came to the attention of HR staff that in processing increases for the police department, only a police step table existed within the all staff pay table. When HR staff tried to locate a policy regarding the police step increases mentioned on the table, it could not be located. Further, when an increase was requested for an officer, no external validation or documentation was being provided within the workflow for the step increases. As staff and council began reviewing the compensation plan, it was confirmed that a recent policy could not be located that matched the current practices of the police step program. As a result, HR staff working with the police department outlined and established the current practices of the STEP program in a formal policy format as it is practiced today, and the 2005 policy is attached for reference. So the city manager, chief of police, captain, and myself met to review how the police STEP program is functioning today and how it can be written into policy moving forward. And this is what took place. First, the policy has not been updated since 2005, and no policy documenting current practices could be located. The length of the 2005 policy is 17 pages due to a long list of skills that are essential functions of the job. And last, the workflow related to collecting documentation on the skills listed in the 2005 policy is not streamlined. In order to address these concerns, we took the following steps. If council decides to utilize a separate compensation plan for police, it will be included in the main compensation plan that encompasses all compensation-related policies and practices for all city employees. The policy has been pared down to remove the list of essential functions of the job called skills, as these functions are listed in the job description and require no external validation. Further, only the critical skills that receive a 5% differential are addressed in the rewritten Policy and the workflow for collecting documentation on the critical skills has been clarified. The years of service has been updated from the 2005 policy, 8-year steps, to reflect a 10-year step program, as is current practice. All other compensation for sworn police officers, for example, the eligibility for citywide COLA, merit, and longevity payouts, aside from the step increases, has been established. This chart shows when police officers should receive increases. The first column is the first 10 years of an officer's career, which means they are in the STEP program. If they're in the STEP program, they receive the STEP increase, market increases, which adjust the pay range based on the market value of the position, and longevity service recognition pay increases. Once they are out of the STEP program, so after 10 years of service, they simply go into the citywide compensation program, meaning they'll receive COLAs, performance-based merits, market increases, and longevity increases. So the key takeaway is while they're in the STEP program, an officer does not receive COLAs or performance-based merits, and once they are out, they match the rest of the city's compensation plan. Any questions so far? So this is the rewritten policy. For the first 10 years of a sworn police officer's career, the employee will be placed in a STEP program. Positions included in this program are police officers, detectives, police sergeants, and detective sergeants. The STEP program entails a 6% increase every 2 years, expediting the employee through the pay range up until they reach 10 years of service. When an employee reaches 10 years of service, they will enter the citywide merit COLA system. Employees in the STEP program will not receive performance-based merit or COLA increases until they enter the citywide merit COLA system. However, the pay range for these positions may change based on regular market reviews as approved by council. Additionally, sworn police officers are eligible for a 5% differential for obtaining any of the following critical skills: phlebotomy certification, verbal and written fluent Spanish language skills, a bachelor's degree related to their field of work, school resource officer designation, firearms instructor certification, and detective designation. The critical skill-based differential is limited to a max of 10%. To continue to reserve the critical skill differential, the certification or designation must be kept current. A sworn police officer can receive the differentials whether in the STEP program or not, and there must be verifiable third-party documentation provided to HR for processing.
Danielle, I just want to point out that you're at the end anyway.
Yes, go ahead.
Is that the end?
Yeah.
That's the important part for me. I can't say that I have a preference for which path we take here, but the fact that it's all going to come through HR now, the documentation, that should be something that you can access, that department can access.
Right.
So it goes back to cleaning it up and putting it in the right place, and so it's that for me. I just don't know if I have a preference on, is there a staff recommendation yet?
There is not.
Okay.
We have two options. One,
Right.
we can treat them as we treat all their other employees, or two, we can go forward with a police compensation
Right.
plan. All we want to do is give you the options and clarify the plan.
Right, and I know we're work session, but will there be a recommendation
From staff?
at the point that it's on the agenda?
No.
Okay. Well, that's not any help on which direction to take. Would it be inappropriate to hear if the chief has a preference? Or is that not appropriate? Or do you mind, chief? Is there a preference in the department currently?
Council, Mayor, Council, the way it's written is very, very, very accurate in what we have been doing for the last number of years. It's worked very well, and it's very helpful in the recruitment process as far as those steps are very helpful in the recruitment process as part of bringing someone over. If we're paying either the similar or close to the same pay as another agency, but we want to bring them over and we can show them this is where they'll move in a very short time period. It's very helpful in that type of situation. The one thing that isn't addressed here, and I think probably should be, and it's actually a good thing, is it's come to me recently, is just what do we do with those that have already been hired in this step system compared to the new hires, and that would be something we would have to discuss down the road.
Right. Like if they're past the 10 years, would they just immediately go into the
I'm
other-
talking about those that are currently in that step system that were hired
Oh,
in,
that are in
promised
the middle
those
of it.
steps.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I see.
And we're not changing any of the program.
No, and that, I'm just saying,
Right.
if the entire system went to, we're just gonna go to what the city system is.
Yeah, what would you
what
do
we
with?
would do with those,
with-
but
yeah,
other than
right.
that.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Can this be into the rewritten policy too, or no?
Well, that's the whole point, right? Again, this kind of reflects the budget and the financial policies, and so
Thanks, Chief.
we recently figured out that Electric has a system very similar, so we'll be talking about that. And so the idea is to bring them all in. So if council decides they want to go with police compensation as a separate program, as this indicates, it would be embedded in the compensation plan, but be identified as this is the police compensation program that would be used to, you know, obviously to get the police raises over the first 10 years. So again, putting everything in one place and then bringing it back so that we can see it if we want to make changes
And
to
we
it.
keep
So
it separate if we want to, right?
well, it would be a separate program, but it would be in the compensation plan, right? So the compensation plan would contain a compensation method for all other employees, and it would have a section identifying and providing the details for how police would be compensated. Wouldn't change anything. If you chose to go with this plan for them, it simply would be another section within the compensation plan, but it would be identifying how it's different. What are the provisions of this plan for the police? So one document, but two different means of compensation. In fact, there will be a third because Electric has a similar system where they test. I also want to get that embedded in the compensation plan. So whenever we bring it back, if you decide you want a police compensation program, you never have to worry about, hey, did it drift off somewhere, we lost it. It's in the overall compensation plan. It simply would be its own section identifying its own provisions.
And there would be documentations in that one program of any,
Yes. To answer your question directly, we do like the step system the way it is, and we like the way of adding it into the compensation plan and having it documented that way. That actually helps us also. So it's a good system for being able to hire and recruit, to keep that step system there, but it also is a great idea of putting it all into one document and having that documentation, so.
You know, what's weird is after 10 years, they instantly, if this is adopted, they instantly move into the COLA system anyway. So why wouldn't you just put them in the COLA system anyway?
Because I think the idea behind this plan was that we want to accelerate the process by which they get raises and ensure that they happen on a regular basis. It's a recruitment tool to make sure that when officers come in, they know they're getting regular compensation over a given period of time. That's the draw, right? You're accelerating the process on the front end that helps us to retain officers over the long term. I believe that is essentially the purpose.
So the other alternative to this would be hire at a higher salary.
Well, and that's an interesting point because
you're going to entice better qualified candidates.
I would agree with that. And also think about it, our policy, aside from the fact that we had this in place, it failed. And why did it fail? Because it failed to keep up with the market adjustments. So in addition to all this will not work either if we don't do regular market analysis and move the ranges of the officers so we keep our police department competitive with other departments in the area. We saw that happen this year. Once the budgets got passed, our officer pay went down. Council and the police chief, you guys addressed that issue. We brought that back up. It had good results. So in addition to all of this, we also have to make sure that we're doing that market analysis. So the short answer to your question or your comment is yes, we have to maintain a competitive salary for our officers just like any other employee in order to retain them.
And we'll market adjust the range either way.
Yes. And that's part of the reason why they go into the COLA, right? Because they're still within a range of salary which they can go up in. Well, if you've gone through the STEP program and you're done, how would you advance other than by having some kind of COLA merit? So at that point, the acceleration has worked. Officers have gone through the 10-year period. They've reached a certain level within their range, but there's still more range left. How do we move them through the rest of the range? Well, you do that by giving them the same type of compensation you give the other employees.
I realized we didn't have the other compensation plan, because that's new anyway. Chief, how, this other version that was happening, did it go beyond 10 years? How did it function?
If you look at it, when it started, it was an 8-year to max of range. And the problem was just like the manager said, is they were getting to the end of range, and then the officers were only 8 years in going, well, I'm never getting another raise. And so they moved it to that 10-year, and it gets them into the range, but not to end of range. So they would go into the city system. That's what we were doing before. And they would follow the same system as the rest of the city. It just moves them ahead faster.
Right.
Because once they're up there, one, like the mayor said, hire them higher, that's great. But if we don't move them up, they eventually fall behind and look for somebody that's paying higher. If we move them throughout the range over a 10-year period, it keeps them ahead of the system, so it's less likely they're gonna go somewhere else.
And then on top of that, the city system that they were even moved into before potentially what we'll be doing now
It's
was-
exactly the same.
was not effective.
Well, it was.
Probably either.
Yeah, once they get through that 10 years and they move into the city system, they're moved just like any other
Right, I'm
employee.
just pointing out that
And
the ci-
that's a great system. It still keeps them moving and gives them
Right.
option to go on.
But that city system probably wasn't helping us retain officers.
Not per se, because the entire range system was
Right.
falling behind.
Right.
And that solves in their plan, it solves it.
Perfect.
So hopefully the point here was to clarify, so that you have an up-to-date written document. Again, we worked with the chief and the captain on making sure that we didn't really alter the provisions. We updated them to reflect the document that we didn't have. The 10-year was really the main thing. We took out a lot of the desired skills as their skills that they would likely have anyway. And so it's based on their annual assessment, and then also the critical skills, which is that area which actually would give them essentially a differential pay. So we'll identify those areas that are 5% differential pay, and then you would get a maximum of 2 of those if council went with a separate plan for police. So at least now you have something to go on, written in front of you that you can make a decision on.
Well, this still, we're just having discussion on this, we're not adopting anything.
Correct.
But we're going from 8 to 10 now, and, or what's suggested here. But there's still a lot of holes in this document, you know, because like it says, for example, the supervisor is gonna get a higher salary than the subordinate, you know, a certain percentage than the subordinate that he's in charge of.
Right.
But it doesn't say what the target is, because they're gonna be buried down there too.
That's the old plan. That's the old plan.
That's the old
That's
plan?
not in this plan.
Is it?
Right, so we provided the old plan so that you could see where we came from, at least the last written version we had. That's not in this plan.
Well, what does a supervisor get above the officer?
Well, it would depend. It would depend on how many years the officer has in. What if you're at the end of your range? I mean, is it not likely that there may be circumstances where a long-serving officer might actually make more than a supervisor? It could happen.
Could happen, okay, that's what I was getting at, because, you know, in our employees, we reward them for having skills, you know, CDL, herbicide spraying, things like that. And the police department has a lot more things that they need to be skilled at. So compensating them for them skills, I don't find any problem for them, but not for every one of them, which I know you took some of them out of here. The additional skills meet the department. And the way it jumps around, I'm still having a little trouble following it, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
So the extent of the new policy is these 2 slides. So it's just 2 paragraphs.
Those 2 right there.
Yes, so you may still be looking at the old policy, but we
Yeah.
simply pared it down to what the current practice is. So
Yeah,
a lot of the
we-
stuff that you are mentioning has, in a way, taken care of itself through the practices that have been going on for several years now. So they're still getting, they have the option to get their 5% differentials based on those skills that have been deemed, they have to study for it, they have to have this certain certification, they have to keep it up and current. So
They only get 2.
they can
out
get a
of it.
max of 2, yeah.
And they have to continue in it, because say pistol training or weapon training, as long as they are training that, they get that. When they don't any longer, it drops back. But they're qualified for something else, they don't lose it totally.
They can, so if they don't keep their certification designation current, they do lose the differential. If they were to go get another one or renew it, they would get the differential.
Okay, they can still get another one even though.
As long as,
they've
yeah,
met
it's
the 10
maxed at
years.
2, yeah.
And one of the reasons that we looked at it the way we did, the listing of skills that were desired were an internal assessment. There was no way for us to validate that assessment. It's something that their supervisor internally would say, like any employee, they would look at it and say, are you meeting these skills? That's something that can still happen within the police department. It doesn't mean that they're not acquiring or retaining or having those skills. It means that there's no external validation for that. So that will happen as part of their evaluation internal to the police department. And then those areas where you get a pay differential, then you would want to have something outside of the step. You would want to have something where there's an external validation. So if I become a phlebotomist, I want to get a certificate that says, hey, I passed whatever external validation I need for that. You can give that to HR. HR can confirm, and then you get your 5%. So the other skills are still relevant, but they're skills that the chief will be assessing as part of his internal assessment of the employee. It's not something that HR can gauge because there's no way to validate that assessment.
Well, and one of the keys for me was the point about if it's in the job description, then
Well,
if it's a skill that you have to be hired for the position, then that's.
well, and
kind
the term for that is an essential function of the job.
Right.
Like you have to be able to do this to do the job.
Right.
So they are skills, but they're essential to the job. And as John mentioned, they're not validated any other way than by the supervisors, the captain, the chief, that they can do that job.
Right. So that clarified that for me quite a bit.
So before, you could get the 6% and the COLA. You could get, if you got 6% at your 2-year mark and we said 3%, then that's 9%. Then you could qualify for 5% more, so you're doing pretty good in that 1 year.
It's my understanding that they were only ever getting the step increases for the majority of the time, and then these differential increases, so.
With what the rewritten policy.
Right, and the rewritten policy does confirm we're gonna continue that practice. So as long as they're in the STEP program, they only get STEP, market, like if their range changes, and
And the
then the
differential.
longevity bonus checks.
Yeah, they would also get longevity, because it's a one-time. So if you adopt the overall compensation plan, then the 5, 10, 15, 20, it's a one-time payment for years of service, they would get that.
Council, real quick, the way they've rewritten it for us is exactly what we've been doing for about the last 5 years. And it's worked very, very well. So they've just condensed it down to what we've really been doing that just hasn't been put into a policy.
Right.
And so we like it, it works well, it does great for recruitment and retention, but they put it into a policy, and that's why I said, yes, we like it and we want to keep it, but we appreciate the fact they've written it in a way that we all understand it and we're in the same place, rather than every time I send her something saying, hey, somebody hit their steps, she's going, well, what does that mean? And we have long conversations about it.
Right.
And that's what this is done for us. It's very helpful.
Which is why putting it in the overall compensation plan means, as a council, whatever council that is, whatever manager you have, whatever police chief you have, all of this will be located in one place, easy to find, and written out, so you know exactly how the implementation is gonna work, even when you have turnover, right? It's all written down, it's clear.
Right, and all the documentation in one place.
Correct. And so again, a lot of what was in the policy didn't really need to be there in order to get them where they needed to be or where they wanted to be in terms of compensation. It hasn't really altered that in any way, and in fact, it updated it to the 10 years, which was never written anywhere. So again, we tried to accommodate whatever the current practice was, but we tried to be clear in what we had so that anybody adopting or providing an increase for the workflow purpose, they know what they're approving, right? That it actually is a council-approved document.
I like it.
Anybody else? I think you got it.
So I guess at this point, as a part of the adoption process for the overall budget, we obviously are going to bring back the compensation plan that we reviewed. And so I would like to have some sense of direction from the council, if you would like to, and maybe, and again, we want to have another night, since we're down a council member, but some sense of direction. Would you like to see the police compensation plan as currently implemented and now codified included as part of the overall compensation plan, or do you want police to be treated in a manner as all other employees are? Some direction as to what you'd like to see us bring in the overall compensation plan is what we're looking for. And again, you don't have to vote on it tonight, I just want to know, and we can bring two pieces and you could, or two versions of the compensation plan that you could vote on.
Seemed like originally there was some talk about creating this sort of a system in the other departments. Has that died?
It died.
I think it was too complex.
Yeah, and again, that's part of this kind of the layering concept where we're getting, we're given the steps and we're doing the COLAs and my assumption is that we have a accelerated plan for a reason. Let's codify it and let that be the compensation. You'll see the same thing with electric. There's a series of tests that they do over a 4-year period that accelerates them from an apprentice to a journeyman. It's a very specific plan. It's fairly lucrative. Again, intended to incentivize and accelerate. If we start layering and doing too much of this, it gets very hard to administer at some point.
Does this, the electrical department doesn't have a short retirement time frame like the police do?
Correct.
Is that why we need the police to be on a different system? Does it have to do with the 25-year retirement compared to the 45-year retirement, or is it just incentivizing someone to stay?
So in the old policy, it stated something along the lines of they essentially wanted to establish a police officer in their early years to be hired here and stay here. So I don't know if at the time they were having a hard time keeping officers on the books, but that was why it was originally created in 2005.
So it wasn't a retirement issue at the time. But certainly.
But it seems like needing to accelerate them through the steps is because they have a shorter, I don't want to use the word lifespan because that's not what I mean talking about, but they can retire at 25 years, whereas the rest of us go 45. Yeah, I can see where you need to get them through there quicker.
Yeah.
Well, in that regard, that is an additional benefit, yeah.
So I can see where the rest of us, the rest of the employees can't be stuck into the same system, but I know that we voiced that, we'd like to see them all the same, but I can see why you can't.
And to clarify, we won't ever vote on this. We'll vote on the entire compensation plan
Correct.
with this as a component.
Right. We just want to be clear on the direction as far as what we're putting in the compensation plan, so
Right.
that when we bring it back, it's in there or it's not.
Right.
Right,
And then we'll vote on the
exactly.
entire
It's either
plan.
in or it isn't. Yeah.
And this is what you're gonna stick with right now?
Yes.
This is what you're gonna bring back?
The new policy embedded in the compensation plan, if that's the direction we feel like council wants to go.
Right, and again, we're bringing you a codified version of what apparently is current practice. As with all things that we bring you, if you so choose to alter it in some way, that's your option. But we wanted to bring you what was currently in practice as a baseline for you to have a discussion, essentially.
This is probably the first one that I've seen come before us that you guys don't even have a recommendation on. That's pretty awesome.
Okay, you've written down what they've been doing, and that wasn't working, so you've actually tweaked it to what you think will work, and now we're gonna implement it. Is that correct?
No, we wrote it as far as what they're currently doing. So what was in practice right now didn't match the 2005 policy.
So then the bump we had to give them here a while back would have taken place in a salary survey. They would have got it there? Okay. Had we done?
Yes, if we'd have, so the 2005 process was not working, and so over time, that's where it had been morphed into what we were currently doing over the last 15, 20 years. Had we had it written in practice of what we're presenting tonight, then the salary surveys and things would have taken care of that issue. We would have never had that problem and fallen behind like that to begin with. So this is hopefully taking what we've learned and what we've been doing and learned from it and implementing it in an actual policy that says we can move forward with it.
Thank you.
So we need to be clear on some direction if it's going in that way to the compensation plan.
Right, and again, if we embed it in as an addendum to the compensation plan, you can vote on the compensation plan and the addendum to make the addendum part of the compensation plan. You'll have a similar situation with electric, and I think that when we look at the way that employees are compensated, one of the challenges that you have with police is retention, because it's a highly competitive market. And I think that one of the benefits for the police, if we go with a plan that's separate like this, is you're guaranteeing them acceleration through that process as a matter of course, right? It's not a decision point unless unless we're really in a bind and you decide you didn't want to do it. But the idea is that they're going to move systematically through the first 10 years of service with the city as essentially an automatic, right? Whereas that has not been the case with the other employees. So again, I think the benefit of the plan is to provide that surety that they will advance on a regular basis year over year. Now, if we are moving into an era where council decides that compensation on a regular basis is a benefit to the city as a whole, i.e. all employees, then the plan as currently configured becomes less important, right? Because compensation is occurring on a regular basis, and then the differentiation point becomes the level of that compensation. This plan gives you 3% a year, right? In an environment where you're not giving regular increases or they're not 3%, this is beneficial. If for some reason the increases are in excess of 3% a year, then it's not as beneficial. But again, that's assuming that there is a regular compensation plan that gets adopted every year as part of the budget process. And I think that's why things of this nature emerged when they did. The one for electric is a little different because it's a training issue, trying to get people up to speed. It's an industry standard used to train and get people up to speed. So again, this is, I think, was a way of making sure that officers were moving through those steps on a regular basis to get them where they wanted them to be.
But it's not an automatic. Not automatic that you're gonna get that 3%, 6% if you're not cutting it.
Correct. You still have to perform, and that's where the chief's assessment on those skill sets, because there's still an evaluation for the employee, right? So it's not a given, but it's just not us doing that assessment. That's why we took it out. That will occur at the departmental level, and the chief or the supervisor will assess the officer and determine whether or not they're meeting those skill sets. We won't have anything to do with that. The only part where we get involved is where the differentials come in and you're looking for a certification for those differentials. Did that help?
Yeah, it helped. It helped.
Okay, so I believe that you're going to, I haven't heard anybody say they wanted to change anything, so you're going to bring it back as is with your.
As a whole in the compensation plan, yes.
Can I move the adjourn?
Yeah.
But you'll still have room for more questions.
Yes.
You have a motion? You have a second to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed?
Have a good night, Bill.